Hello, my name is Tammy Bannister, and welcome to VIFF, Mr. Alan Zweig. How are you today?
I'm good, and no problem. Zweig is
Zweig.
very good, but it's Zweig.
Zweig. Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Zweig
Where are
is
you?
second place.
It's German, right?
It's a German word, but yeah, my family decided that the German spelling was better than the Polish spelling. Thus, a lifetime of spelling your name for somebody ensued.
Okay. And where are you joining us from today?
I'm in the Bloor West Village in downtown Toronto.
Excellent, excellent. I'm obligated to give the audience a brief intro, if you'll indulge me for a second. You are one of Canada's most celebrated and admired documentarians and interviewers. You're well known for the ability to hone an intimate conversation on screen, complete with finely tuned observations, which admittedly applies a bit of pressure for me interviewing you today. Your first doc, Vinyl, premiered at TIFF over 20 years ago, and you started working on that 25 years ago. And Vinyl pushed you into the spotlight, and the doc is celebrated even today as one of the most important films about music ever made. Your films have graced the screens of festivals all over the world and have won numerous awards. And of course, your first-person video diary approach became a trademark method of self-analysis, which you continue to employ with this most recent film. So in Records, you start by establishing that it's kind of a sequel, kind of a bookend, I think you said, an answer and a tribute to Vinyl. And I find that fascinating that you return to this topic of obsessive behavior, not only once, but twice. For those who don't know, after Vinyl, you also made an alternate cut of the film, which is composed mostly of the footage that didn't make it into the original film. And now we're here with Records. So why? What compels you? What compels you to continue with this topic?
Okay, so it's weird to have your biography said to you in the second person. You did this and you did that. But anyway, I'll do that. And also, I have a little campaign to rid the world of the word documentarian, which I hate, but I don't hold it against you. And the Vinyl alternate take that I made was basically because I never got it together to do a video or a DVD or something. And that was my idea of what do you call it? Like extra stuff that comes on a DVD. Rather than give you a bunch of scenes, I would make a completely separate version of the film, which to my, not really delight. Some people said they liked that better than the film. Okay, so basically what happened was, when I made Vine, I think a lot of the things I'm about to tell you, I think if you watch the film or if you've watched the film, you'll kind of know, but I'll color it in a little. When I made Vinyl, I was not initially intending to make it so personal. All I wanted to do was I thought, well, I'll interview people. I don't know what they'll tell me. Just in case, I better tell you about my collecting. So at least there'll be something in there because I'd never interviewed anybody. When I sat down and I started to talk to the camera, I was like, well, while I'm here, I might as well tell you about all my complaints about how my life is shit and hasn't worked out. And then somehow that invaded the film and like I was almost projecting my misery onto people. When the amazing thing is, to this day, record collectors, as a defense against the idea that they're obsessive bean counters are like train spotters, will tell you, I'm not a collector. I do it for the music. And 25 years ago, when people said that, I was like, oh my, that was just such a weird thing to hear, because like, yeah, okay, yeah, we like the music. I mean, everybody likes music. Not everybody has 20,000 records that they've never even heard because they just bought it, like, so a theme of vinyl became me arguing against people who said it's about the music. Of course, it's kind of about the music, but okay, am I ranting? So anyway, that became a theme in vinyl, like me saying, dude, it's not about the music. I mean, I took it for granted that, yes, of course, the music is where it starts. We like music, but, it was kind of me against everyone. That's how it turned out. And one of the ways it turned out was that I kind of laughed at people who said, it's just for the music. If you've seen the film, you can see people do it still. But anyway, so a lot of people over the years complained, like, of the 1,000 people who hate vinyl, 999 of them are probably record collectors. Those are the people that dislike the film the most, because the people, I didn't make it for record collectors. The only reason the film became, the cult film it is because it's not for record collectors. Although the vast majority of record collectors do like vinyl, but there are a lot of people that don't, and I know some of their names. And one of their complaints was there is not about the music.
Yeah.
So now, 25 years later, I just happened to catch the film, and I was like, oh, you know what? You were pretty depressed then. And maybe that infected the film. And I just finished my 10th feature doc, and I thought, kind of like, I'm starting over again. Why don't you make vinyl again? Except this time, make it more about the music. That's basically the idea, which I have to say, I make it sound all logical. I don't think it was a very good idea. It's kind of a crazy idea. Like, who cares they made 10 films? Whatever, make another film. Like, it's not like they come in sets of 10. But
well, are you familiar with the idea, that's kind of like pop culture idea, that artists are either conceptual innovators or experimental innovators? And the conceptuals will be sort of like the Bob Dylans. This is kind of like the usual example. The Bob Dylans are the ones who just churn something out. They're meticulous about it. And then when they're done with it, they're done with it. And that's it. That's the final. And then the experimental innovator would be someone more like a Leonard Cohen, who, his song Hallelujah went through many iterations, not only from him, but with other artists, and then came back to him. And it sort of had this whole other life, and it becomes this kind of never-ending project for Cohen. And it sort of is like something that never really got put to bed, but is continuously being worked on. Do you feel like that's something happening with you?
I mean, the thing is, it's complicated. I recognize at this point for me that whatever I do, whatever it's about, I could make a film about people whose last name is Bannister. And it would just be me making the same film that I kind of always make. I don't like it when people say that to me, but there's some truth to it. It kind of doesn't matter. So, vinyl was a cataclysmic event in my life. Like, I was pretty old, and like, when the film came out, I was 48. I've had a lot of success in 20 years, but I'd kind of given up and really thought nothing would ever happen. And it was like this weird explosion that like blew a hole into my life and changed everything. So I can't shake that. Like, and I don't really want to shake it. People still discover the film. People still talk about it. People still whatever. So I thought, I always kind of thought after I made it that I would revisit it. I just didn't know how. And also like the number of people that saw vinyl and know that I wanted to have a daughter. And then when I had a daughter, not only said, way to go, you have a daughter, but even quoted the speech in vinyl where I talked about wanting a daughter. So, I know we're talking about a very small number relatively in the world, but I don't know. I just thought it would. And I have to say that it's cool that it's premiering at VIFF because probably my favorite experience with the film early on was it became a very popular film at the Blinding Light Cinema in Vancouver. It was a favorite. I have a number of friends who are ex-Vancouverites who told me they went on a date to see vinyl at the Blinding Light when the place closed down. They had a week of films that had been the most favorite there, and vinyl was one of them. So yeah, so vinyl was a big thing, and I don't think this film is as good as vinyl. I'm going to say that straight out, but it wasn't the craziest idea that you could make an homage to that film. It wasn't crazy.
Yeah, I think they're different films. It's not, it's definitely not the same thing. There's an evolution of something in you and in, I think, record collectors in general. There's like, I mean, obviously vinyl has influenced our perception of what record collecting is and who they are, what they look like, what the scene is like. And I guess I would just, before I get into that piece, I do want to ask a question that kind of leaves off where we left off was, and direct me if I'm off base on this, because it may purely be that the folks you interviewed steered you in this direction, but it also kind of feels like there's maybe after a bit of reflection years later, that maybe you felt you didn't give Imants his due as a prominent figure in the scene.
Well, yeah, so well, I have no idea what's going to happen but supposedly people who are seeing this have seen the film, so that I couldn't call that a spoiler alert. The funny thing about this film was that I just put the word out and just looked for record collectors, and I found a whole bunch. And when I made vinyl, some really extreme characters came my way. But when I made this, no really extreme character. Like I could have, there was a couple of somewhat extreme characters, but even they were kind of sweet compared to the ones I met during vinyl. And I do wonder if that's just a coincidence, or because I didn't want in any way to make fun of people. Not that I ever wanted to make fun of them, but I just didn't really want. It's like, okay, we know some people are crazy. If you want that, go see my other film. But this film, I don't want to do that. I want to try and, I mean, the weird thing about the film is, for me, is that my absolute goal when I started was to make a sweet, positive film. While I was making it, I suddenly realized, oh God, that's really hard for me. It's way easier for me to do something dark. When I'm interviewing somebody and it's dark and they say something great, it's like my mind is going bang, that'll be in the film. When I was interviewing people for this film, it was like really hard to figure out, yeah, that's interesting for me because I'm a record collector, but how's that going to be for T. Bannister, who's not a record collector, So,
well, it was great. I'll tell you, it was great.
Okay, but I'm just saying,
I was drawn to that.
It was hard for me to be sweet and positive, but
I bet
that was my goal, and that's what I went for, and that's why I like. And so you're referring to a guy that I interviewed for vinyl, and it was kind of shocking. I mean, it's even like a weird coincidence. The very first shoot I did for this film was that record sale out in the farm by this guy, J.C. Culp, that starts the film, kind of. I thought that is near Hamilton. I thought a certain guy, Gary, lived in Hamilton, and I thought, well, I'll interview you while you're in Hamilton. I booked the interview with him. Turned out he didn't live in Hamilton. So if I didn't think that guy lived in Hamilton, I wouldn't have booked the interview with this guy. But he didn't live in Hamilton, so we went there next. He mentioned Iman's. It's the very first interview I'm doing. And he mentions this guy who I interviewed for my last film, who I purposely did not put in the film because I kind of thought, well, I don't want to say he was a loser, but I kind of thought he was a kind of a poor sap. Like, I don't know what words to use. I just thought, I kind of felt sorry for him because he lived at home. And that was all I saw, was that he lived at home. Mm-hmm. I ignored everything else about him because I wanted to have a family and children, and the guy living in his parents' basement, to me, was sort of automatically like life's sad sack. Mm-hmm. And when this guy mentioned him and I thought about him, immediately I realized what a fool I had been. Here was a guy who had found his joy, who had found everything he needed in life, and I had so poorly judged him. And that was the very first interview I did, and that ended up, I think, it's not just in the film, but it was weird to realize. It was like somebody said, you don't know how much you've changed. I'm going to mention a guy's name. And he did, and it was like, oh my God, I feel 180 degrees different than I did. I was filled with kind of shame, but also like kind of excitement that, I've changed. So that, I hope that comes out in the film.
I think it does. I mean, I sort of disagree with you. I think there are big personalities all vying for screen time in records, maybe not as intense as vinyl, but there's a fluidity to all of the folks you interview. There's something, everyone feels a little less rigid in their thinking, in their sort of like how they practice their obsession. And as you do as well, you feel less rigid. That's I think, an interesting evolution to explore, and I applaud you for doing that. And you brought up change, which is also a theme that comes up in the film around the Neil Young song, Change Your Mind, which I thought was a beautiful tribute to those lyrics. And
can I tell you a little secret for the audience? I'm not even sure I'm allowed to do this, but I'm going to take a chance. So when I told that story in the film, I said, Neil sings a little bit like, Neil sings something like, imploring you, directing you, and then the chorus is, change your mind, da 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 da, change your mind. Okay, so that's the version you have seen, but that's not the version your audience will have seen, because that cost $75,000 for me to sing those 3 words.
Okay.
So I changed it I just told the same story. I just didn't sing. I think it still works. I hope it does, but I'm sorry. No, but your audience, I don't think they'll charge me $75,000.
Well, maybe one day there will be a cut with that piece in it.
Or I hope, I mean, I can really see my lawyer going, what, you sang it in the Q&A? I hope none of Neil Young's people are in the audience. Anyway, but
I don't think they can charge you for singing.
But that's interesting that you make that connection, that the song Change Your Mind is part of the theme. I think that I like that you're making that connection.
Yeah, I think there's actually a bit of an undercurrent of a bit of a rebuke of fundamentalist ideas. And I see that in some of the interviews and some of the images that you chose to show, a lot of the lyrics and the music that some of the collectors were sharing. And I think that is really the undercurrent of what is happening throughout the film, is this idea that we can change. And maybe it sounds a little hokey or new agey to, you know, sort of say that you've evolved or you've, you know, manifested this life that you had always, you know, hoped to have. But I think that that's true in this case. And I think it's beautiful to embrace that. So.
Well, you know, I think you're right. I mean, the thing is, what we do not have time to talk about the issue of, do people change? Don't people change? How much do they change? Are you going to change as much as your ex-wife wanted you to? No, that's why she's your ex-wife. You know, like often in my life, I've thought, no, we can't change. And, you know, I could argue both sides, but yes, I've definitely, like, you know, in my case, you know, here's the thing. I realize that when I was miserable because I didn't have a family, that was a choice. That's a weird thing. I realize now that was a choice. While I can totally say that having my daughter makes me happier, I also am very aware that I chose to only be happy if I had her. So that gives my present happiness somehow a different spin. I don't know what, but I am happy now. Like I am, it's boring. It is boring. I feel there's this old Russian science fiction thing I saw where they're traveling for 18 years and the scientists have factored in problems for them because otherwise they would just go for 18 years or something and have no problems. So I am bringing problems into my life, but actively all the time. But no, the thing is, I'm pretty happy and I really like buying records and listening to them and obsessing over them and being incredibly neurotic about them, about like, well, I like that, but you know, like I don't like it that much. Yeah, that's records make me happy, and that's I want to, you know, like people saw vinyl as a kind of cautionary tale, but also it did kind of make people interested in being a record collector because it was like, ooh, I want to be fucked up like that guy. But in this one, I feel it's really an actual straight on invitation to join our tribe.
Yeah.
Go to
and enjoy the music.
Yeah, and yeah, enjoy the music.
Well, listen, I learned from you in the film that it's crass to ask a record collector how many records they have, but I have to know how many records did you have at the peak of your collecting, and how many do you have now?
Well, so many people who collect never get rid of anything. I don't really understand how that works. So I'm sure I have, if I had everything I've ever had, I probably had 10,000 records. At the peak of what I kept, I probably had 3,000. Now I have 1,600, and I only know that because they're all listed on Discogs, and they give you a total. 1,600 that shows real commitment, but it's not like, yeah, there's a lot of people in the film have more. A lot of them would say, oh, what are you making in a film? You only have 1,600. Like, but yes, I have 1,600. I have some in that room and some upstairs. I have 2 stereos, records upstairs. My girlfriend doesn't like, so I keep the records for company and my girlfriend down here. Yeah, 1,600.
Final question. What is your most coveted record at this moment?
Well, yeah. people have holy grails, and I don't have any because I think it's silly for me to have a holy grail. But I did have one holy grail. It's a record called Or. It's by a musician called Skip Spence. He's Canadian, and he was in Moby Grape, and he made this one record after Moby Grape, and after he got out of an insane asylum. And it's a legendary record, and for some reason, over the years, it has become more and more expensive. Friends of mine have found it in a thrift store for $10, but it's very unlikely. I was sure I would find it while I was making this film, but that's partly because I thought I was going to travel through the States where records are a little cheaper and more. I didn't find it. When I locked picture on the film, I bought it from a guy online for 250 Canadian dollars, and now I own it. And so I'm done. Like, I don't have any more. I would never, that's the first time I've ever spent over $50 for a record, and might be the last time I spent over $50 for a record. But I highly, people in the know will know what record I'm talking about. Alexander Skip Spence, or you should play me out with a song from that record.
We'll see how much it costs to do that first.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your time with us and all of your lovely stories. For anyone who has not seen vinyl, I encourage you to do it. You can easily find it online. And thank you once again.
Thank you for showing the film.
Cheers.